When discussing the 2016 budget, I mentioned that there were the amount of funds that we're providing for the Episcopal Church pledge for 2015 as well as outreach. But you have to understand we have other funds that are outside the budget that we use to support congregations in a number of ways. So the Episcopal Church pledge, again, and outreach is $613,000, but there's another $600,000 that we distribute each year in a variety of ways. For Congregational Support, just under $230,000 from the Ward J. Herbert Fund and the Bishop's Church Emergency Fund to help with building repairs and emergencies. $195,000 from the Axe Vim Fund and the Marge Christie Congregational Growth and Vitality Fund for congregations and their programs and projects. And an additional $167,000 from funds that are dedicated to scholarships for clergy children and diocesan youth. A total of about $1.2 million that will be distributed in 2014, and that's been about the 2016. That's been about the average since for the 3 years since 2014. And that I thought that was up. Okay, that's in your book as well. There are two important committees in addition to Diocesan Council that provide critical roles in terms of the assets and the finances of the diocese. The Trustees of the Episcopal Fund, commonly referred to as the Trustees, and the Diocesan Investment Trust. The Trustees manage real estate such as Episcopal House, the Bishop's residence, and closed church properties. They work to sell closed church properties to the extent that they can. They provide support to maintain the closed church properties during that period of time before they're sold. And they provide funds to support part of the diocesan budget. I mentioned the $28,000 that they give us from their investment income. These are the investments, and these are managed by the Diocesan Investment Trust. That's a committee that oversees $53 million of investments. We invest them through TIA-CREF with a series of mutual funds that are made up of mutual funds. 31 million of those are trustee funds, and the other 22 million are invested for funds such as the Ward J. Herbert Fund, Axe Vim, but also on behalf of, as directed by a number of congregations. There's probably about 40 or 50 congregations that have some money in the Diocesan Investment Trust. And there's a lot more detail about this in your booklet as well. So the purpose for today was to give you an overview of the finances of the diocese. Went over the results for 2015. We expect to be in the black. The proposed budget for 2016 went over the $1.2 million of money that the diocese will distribute during the year, and touched on the roles of the trustees and the Diocesan Investment Trust. But let me just summarize it in a little more personal way. I've been a member of St. Andrew's in Harrington Park for just under 35 years. I've been warden, vestry, treasurer, finance chair, plus the other stuff. I've been on I've been a deputy to convention. I've been on the audit committee of the diocese. So I've been involved with my share of budgets, both on a church basis as well as on a diocesan basis. And I can remember not too long ago when we didn't think we had any money to spend for outreach. My first year here in 2011, we had to cut our pledge to the Episcopal Church, and we had to cut outreach so that we could end the year where income equaled the expenses. Yet today we're presenting a budget which is balanced, provides an increase in our outreach spending, continues to invest in the future by putting more money and funds for our missional church initiatives, and also continues to put money against those expenses that we know are coming up, the lay pension plan and the search and call of our next bishop. And continues to fund our youth and young adult ministries, our stewardship efforts, and all of the other things that we've talked about. I'm happy to say that we can say all of that in support of this budget for 2016. So are there any questions about any of what you've heard. Kirk.
Just, forgive me if this was in one of the, if you've already gone over this, but I didn't see it. You referenced spending for closed church buildings. And I was wondering if you could tell me what, in rough terms, how much money does the diocese spend every year on an after-tax basis for former church buildings that are now taxed?
Well, let me take it a slightly different way, but answer your question. First of all, none of what I've talked about has anything to do with closed churches. Once a church is closed, it becomes the domain and the responsibility of the trustees, so none of their expenses are in this budget. This budget that we've talked about today is just the operations of the diocese and all the programs that we've been doing. The trustees have funds of their own, which they use to handle any of those kinds of costs. So you're right, there are churches that once it's closed, there's nobody to pay for anything there, so the trustees have to pay the maintenance, the security, the utilities, all of those costs. And in some cases, they may be renting them out and they have to pay real estate taxes and so on. That's all outside of this, and that's what the trustees' responsibility is.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things, a question that had come up several years ago was along those lines, how much is in the budget that we're using to keep some of the smaller struggling churches going? And the assumption there was that if there's a small church where there's 15 or 20 people there, that the diocese is giving some money to keep them going. The answer is zero. There's no money in here that's being given to any other church to simply keep them going. Any other? Yeah, Kirk.
Okay, so the trustees, I understand it's a separate budget, but isn't that also diocesan money on some level?
It's diocesan money in that, in some cases, the money has been given to the trustees to be used to maintain properties. When a church closes, it sometimes has funds left. So those become trustee funds, and they can use those funds to pay the bills. And then also when churches are closed and the buildings are sold, the question is, what do we do with the net proceeds? I mentioned earlier that some of the proceeds have to go to Marge Christie Fund, have to go to the New Ministry Initiatives Fund. Some of them could go to and have in the past, have gone in some cases to the trustees to use to maintain those. But those are the sales of closed church properties, not something from here.
Thank you.
Okay. So, what's next? As we mentioned before, we have in the past had 3 pre-convention meetings, but we've seen the number of attendees at those pre-convention meetings go down over the past number of years. So we decided that we would go to one that also addresses another issue. For those of you who are sitting here today and have listened to this, if we didn't change something, you'd hear it all again on Friday afternoon of convention. And I understand that some people don't want to do that. I'm not sure I understand why, but I've heard that. Somebody said that, well, never mind. So what we decided is that we're going to do something different. So we're going to have one pre-convention meeting, that's today. I'm being videotaped. We'll see if this works. If not, next week we'll videotape me in chunks, and it'll be, that didn't sound right, in a section on 2015, a section on 2016, and so on. So you can go, anybody can go and look at those online, and they can hear as much of the budget as they want. At Friday of convention at 3 o'clock, when the budget is presented, I'll give a 10 to 15 minute executive summary, and that's it. There'll be a workshop following that, at which people who are not here today or people who didn't want to watch the videos can come and hear what you heard today. So there's 3 opportunities that people can hear, because we want the deputies to hear what they're voting on. And then there'll also be the budget forum at the end of Friday, where people can come and ask any questions they have of the budget or anything else. And then on Saturday, we will have the vote for the budget.
Excuse me, Paul.
Yes?
So, but again, if I understand, but none of those forums after this point forward will offer an opportunity to make changes to the budget.
None of those offer an opportunity for change in the budget. Well, that's correct. I mean, if there were, changes to the budget or additions to the budget were to have been submitted a long time ago so that it could already be in here. That was the point. Done.
I'm a long-term deputy. This used to take a half a day on Saturday. It's now down to minutes. Pat yourself on the back.
Score.